prison cell I was in Vietnam is 8 feet long and 8 feet wide. I remember distinctly the dimensions of that little cell. I could pace 3 steps in one direction before I ran into a wall. Then I had the opportunity of turning around and pacing 3 steps the other way. Inside my new little home, I had nothing to do. I had no books to read, no window to look out, no TV, telephone, radio, BlackBerry, Bluetooth. I didn't have a pencil or a piece of paper for 2,103 days. To give you a better feel for that window of time, 2,103 days equates to age 24 to age 30 in my life. Or turn your calendar ahead to the year 2020. Consider between today and 2020, the books you'll read and classes you'll take and deals you'll do and kids you'll raise. It's a pretty good chunk out of a guy's life. Now, I've been a very active guy, like each of you, on the go all the time, searching for an extra 15 minutes a week to call my mom. And suddenly I had 24 hours a day for the next nearly 6 years. I'm describing this scenario to you somewhat semi-dramatically. Please excuse the drama. In no way do I intend to invite sympathy from this crowd. But I think the most value I can be in your life, whether you come here as a plebe or a vice admiral, whether you're a manager or a mother, whether your goal in life is to change the world or to change a diaper, the most value I can be in the few minutes we're together is to invite you into my little prison cell. There's a great deal to be learned here. So, for the next few moments, I'd like for you to try your best to smell the stench of that 2-gallon bucket in the corner I call my toilet. I'd like you to try to feel the baking heat of a tropical summer in a tin roof prison cell, 120 degrees, not a breath of air. I'd like you to try to taste the salt. The annoying taste of salt in the corners of your mouth from the sweat and the tears and the blood. Not that you'll ever be prisoners of war, God forbid. But if I do my job this afternoon, you'll see where some of the same kinds of challenges you and I face daily. Yes, as mids, as officers, as pilots, as citizens, as parents. Same challenges we face on a daily basis are the very challenges that I faced in that prison cell. And more importantly, your response to that challenge, if you're going to succeed, has to be the same recipe of responses we used over there just to survive. And one more thing. If this is already too great a stretch for you, if you're already having trouble bridging this gap of time and geography between my life experience and yours, the best I can offer you is an interesting war story. But here's the connect. Here's the touch point. Here, perhaps, is the reason your life and mine intersected on October 1st, 2014. There's not a person in this auditorium who has not, in the last few weeks or months, felt overwhelmed and underappreciated. There's not a mid in this crowd who hasn't been frustrated and ready to quit and think you've been being put upon. There's not a person who hasn't, in the last few weeks or months, had your very baseline value system challenged. So, once you get the hang of this, once you can feel the feels and smell the smells of my experience, put aside your comfort zone just for a minute, give away your fancy uniforms, give away your titles and your achievements and your family, give all that up, step into a dingy little prison cell a long way from home. When you have that feel, have a couple of questions. Here's the first one. How do you survive this? What kind of stuff do you have in your gut? What did you bring to lunch today? What kind of tools do you have in your psychological toolbox you'd pull out and apply to a problem like this? Question number 2. officers, future officers, leaders. What about the guys next door? Yeah, what about those Americans in that cell next to yours, guys that are clinging to life by their fingernails and in a world of hurt? They need your help, but they don't trust you. They think you have some kind of hidden agenda. How do you get through to them? Well, the first thing you learn in a prison cell is pain. You probably figured that out. This hurts. This hurts a lot. This hurts physically, this hurts mentally, this hurts emotionally, this flat out hurts. Second thing, you might not suspect this. The second thing you learn in a prison cell is, well, the minutes eventually wear into hours, and the hours eventually wear into days, days into weeks, weeks into months, and you acclimate. Yeah, you learn how to breathe deeply and think about things far away, sunny beaches and warm breezes and thoughts of home, and you know what happens? You get used to this. You really do. In fact, you get so comfortable in your little prison cell that the last place you want to go is outside the cell because it's dark and lonely out here. At least you know the devil in the light. What happens is you get a restriction built up, and it's not the 8 feet between the walls. It's the 8 inches between your ears. You're in a mental box. Ever get in one of those mental boxes? Mm-hmm. Do your classmates get there? Mm-hmm. Do your parents get there? Yep. We all get in those little, I'm convinced the mental boxes of our lives can be more restrictive than those walls of stone and steel that I was behind. But I don't mind telling you this. It didn't take me very many miles. At 3 steps by 3 steps, I was going nuts. I finally decided, Charlie, if you're going to survive this, you're going to have to come up with something to do, get a little creative, make a little game to play. I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll make a little deck of cards. And I did. I constructed a little deck of playing cards about the size of postage stamps. I tore these cards from 52 little strips of toilet paper. And I can tell you this with authority, toilet paper is tough to shuffle. You don't lick your fingers very much. Okay, back to the question. How do you survive a situation like this? And how does this deal, in fact, with leaders, especially ordinary people doing the extraordinary? I'm going to tell you about some leaders because I watched. I was a JG when I was shot down in a prison camp. I came back as a lieutenant commander. I was promoted twice while I was there and didn't know it. I've never been a Navy lieutenant. But I watched. And I watched great leaders like Stockdale and Denton, Billy Lawrence, John McCain, Seaman Douglas Hegdall. I'm going to tell you about those leaders. But what does it take to survive in a prison camp? Well, you got to keep your parachute packed. Let me explain that. I sat down in a restaurant in Kansas City where I used to live. About 2 tables over, a guy kept looking at me. I didn't recognize this gent. He stood up. He walked over to my table. He pointed at me with kind of a serious look on his face, and he said, "You're Captain Plumb." I looked up and I said, "Yes, sir, I'm Captain Plumb." He said, "You're that guy. You flew jet fighters in Vietnam. You're a fighter pilot. Off the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You were shot down over Vietnam. You parachuted into enemy hands. You spent 6 years as a prisoner of war." Somewhat dumbfounded, I looked up at this guy and I said, "How in the world did you know all that?" He finally broke into a smile and he said, "Because I packed your parachute." Tell you this, with this guy that runs around the country making speeches, suddenly I was speechless. The best I could do was stagger to my feet, reach out a very grateful hand of thanks. Now, he came up with just the proper words. The guy grabbed my hand, he pumped my arm, and he said, "I guess it worked." I said, "Indeed it did, my friend, and I must tell you I've said a lot of prayers of thanks for your nimble fingers, but I had no idea I'd ever had the opportunity of expressing my gratitude in person." He said, "Were all the panels there?" I said, "I must be honest with you, they weren't. Of the 18 panels I was supposed to have in that parachute, I had only 15 good ones. But it wasn't your fault. It was mine. I ejected from that F-4 Phantom at 600 knots close to the ground. I was well outside the envelope of that parachute. You did your job. I didn't do mine. I said, but let me ask you a question. Do you keep track of all the parachutes you pack? Guy said, no. Now, this is the most important part of the conversation that night. And maybe the most important thing I say to you this afternoon. I think it deals directly with you and your job as a midshipman, as an officer, as a student, as a parent, as a citizen. Here's what he said. No, I don't keep track of all the parachutes I pack. It's enough gratification for me just to know that I've served. Here's a sailor well below the waterline of that aircraft carrier. His job is to stand at a long wooden table, and he weaves the shrouds, and he folds the silk panels of these parachutes, and he passes them along one after another, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, while the top gun, while the jet jockey screams around the sky at the speed of sound, and I couldn't have cared less about that guy down there in the hole. Until one day my parachute came along, and he packed mine up for me. Question becomes, gang, who packs your parachute?